what's that business called, the base, or there's an office building there?
Like a yoga studio.
Yeah, just keep going north, and
Okay.
there's
Ooh,
it's right now there's a bunch of just tractor trailers there, semi trailers.
Luckily, it doesn't have to go to video.
Yes.
Kind of
Escapes
cover
level.
that.
Yeah.
Probably a sheriff out there. All right, it is 10:35. The chair is late. And he apologizes, but we are ready to get started. We've got roll call and attendance. Item number 1 on the agenda for Tuesday, November 14th, for the Green Bay Housing Authority is item number 1, approval of October 19, 2017 minutes of the Green Bay Housing Authority. You have all that in your packet, and your information is all emailed out to everyone. Any additions, corrections, or modifications? No. Hearing none, all in favor signify by, or is there a motion to approve? Excuse me.
What do you mean? I wasn't here last month.
I'll make a motion to approve.
And I will second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Communications, nothing on, no late communications. Old business, nothing carried over. Item number 2 under new business. Consideration and possible action regarding financial support of TWG Development's housing project Broadway Lofts. And then we have a presentation this morning.
Yes, I'll start it off with a little introductory explanation. You may recall that we talked about this project briefly at a previous Housing Authority meeting. And today we have Joe and Tony from TWG here to talk about this project in more detail and hopefully answer any questions that you might have. So I think with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Joe Whitsitt. I am one of the founders of TWG Development. We're based in Indianapolis, Indiana. The other founder is my son right here, Tony. So we started TWG about 10 years ago, and this is our first trip into Wisconsin for development work because Jonathan Elke, who works with us, one of our best developers who's from this area, is on vacation this week, and so Tony and I said we would cover the meeting. So if there's anything we mess up about Green Bay, we apologize in advance. We'll try not to talk about it like we know a lot about it. So today I just wanted to go through a little introduction about our company, what we do, and our growth that we've experienced and where we operate, and then talk most of the time about the project itself, its location, the budget, what market we're trying to tap into here, then also just the design and our anticipated schedule. Our company, I guess I have to push the button. We were founded in 2007 in Indianapolis. I worked in the affordable housing and multifamily housing area as a lawyer for a big firm in Indianapolis for about 15 years. Before that, I practiced as a CPA at an accounting firm called Ernst & Young, all doing real estate development and housing. So it was a natural for me to move into multifamily housing development. When my son graduated from IU, we started our company together, and it has grown into a fully integrated company now. We have obviously the development company that finds the deals and figures out the financing. We have an in-house architectural firm, a construction company, and a management company. All of those are not always money makers, and they're not always to make money, but it's more to control the process from the very beginning to management for the full 15-year or more compliance period. So we do take it from cradle to success, not to grave, just to success. We've done 64 developments so far in the last 10 years in 7 different states. We've about $871 million of developments either developed or in the pipeline. 100% of this is multifamily housing. We do have some developments that have retail or office on the first floor in a downtown environment, but it's always focused on multifamily for rent housing. That's what we think we're good at. We do a lot of joint ventures with not-for-profit partnerships. That was a forte of mine when I practiced law. I represented a lot of nonprofit community development corporations. So we have joint ventured over the years with not-for-profit corporations and actually municipal public housing authorities also to develop affordable housing. As a group, we bring about 75 years of development experience just in the ownership group alone, which is nothing to brag about. That just tells you how old I'm getting, I think. So. Just a couple examples of what we've developed. These are both in the first one's in Indianapolis on the left. That's a large market rate property just a mile from the city center, or I'm sorry, a block from the city center in downtown Indianapolis. It's called Polium Square. It's one piece of property that was originally owned by the family that operated the Indianapolis Star newspaper. We bought that whole city block and we're redeveloping sections at a time. On the left is, actually this is at Fort Harrison, which was the Army base in Indianapolis that was decommissioned back in the 80s. This is 21 units plus a unit for a resident manager who lives there, 100% for developmentally disabled adults. This was actually started, the idea was started with a nonprofit that I was very familiar with called Marici Village. It was a group of parents of developmentally disabled children who were now adults, and they were really trying to come up with a solution for the long-term care of the disabled children as they age and the parents age even as quickly. So that's about a $3.6 million development. It's up and running. Has been phase 2 is probably going to start in a year or two because it's been wildly successful out there. I guess I just keep pushing buttons and see what comes up. Our construction company, we started our company in 2007, just a development company. We started the construction company in 2009. It's grown from 1 employee to over 65 employees. You can see the statistics there of the things that our construction company has done. But what I do want to drive home is that we have it's a real construction company. We do construction management and site supervision. All of the work when we're out of town is done by out-of-state, Indiana out-of-state developer or subcontractors. So all, if not 99%, if not all, the subcontractors will come from this area. We don't have subcontractors who travel with us, and we don't have a whole group of employees that just move to a city, build something, and then leave. So the money that we're going to spend on this project, most of it, if not all of it, will stay right in this community or in this region, the MSA. This is probably our management company. We, in 2008, so right after we started a management company that was purely to control the quality of the management that goes on in our properties. We are developers. We love developing properties. But when I practiced law, I watched a lot of developments fail because the developers focused on development and never cared about they got their money and then they moved on. And those projects they never were managed properly, the ones that failed. And so we take a lot of pride in our properties. We manage all of our own properties. We don't manage for anybody else because I don't think third-party managers are as good as owner managers. So we manage everything ourselves and only our own properties. The site, you're probably very familiar with this. It's at 400 North Broadway Street, just a stone's throw from where we are right now. It's an 11-acre site. Right now it's vacant. So it's not quite vacant. There's a lot of trailer storage there for semis or tractor trailers that are being stored there right now. There's a great need for housing in this area. I will say Tony and I have looked at that a lot because we want to make sure that there is a need for what we're trying to build in every deal that we do. And we think we have a great plan here to meet those needs. The city plan for this area talked about commercial, retail, and multifamily development on page 22 of the plan. And we want to provide a lot of the retail and commercial has already happened or is happening, and we want to provide that multifamily piece on the very north end of the site. We will target workforce housing and millennials that are currently priced out of the downtown housing market. There's a statistic later. The affordable housing in this market is 100% occupied. That's the average occupancy is 100%, which is phenomenal. And it's in the high 90s, I think 98 or 99% for market rate. We'll see in a second here. We are also setting aside, I think, 8 units that have a voucher attached to, or vouchers attached to them, public housing vouchers, for graduates of the transitional housing that is next door to this property, just to the north of us. We will create probably 2 to 4 full-time jobs. It's not a labor-intensive. Once we get our units built, we have managers and maintenance people on staff. They're full-time positions, and so it'll be somewhere between 2 and 4, depending upon the needs of the property. We will have about 120 temporary construction positions created, and again, in this community or from this region. The services we offer to our residents, we have a resident council, the neighborhood watch, and then the building itself will have exercise rooms, community space, craft space, so it'll be lots of places for them to work. As I mentioned, we have 8 vouchers for graduates of the transitional housing from New Communities Shelter, Inc. We think that model has worked where if you can provide that housing very close to where the services are, if not in our building, then close to where the services are, and it will result in an increased success rate, I'm positive. Again, the market demand, yeah, here's the statistic. 100% is the average occupancy rate for affordable housing in your community, which is a great statistic. It means that, I mean, obviously, there's a shortage because you really shouldn't be at 100%. But it's great because it must be high-quality affordable housing that has already been built here because, again, it's 100% occupied. And the market rate average is 99.2%, which is pretty amazing when you think about, you know, for us, 95% we think is full occupancy because you always have someone who's moving and their unit's vacant while you're paying it. So there's always, every time someone moves out, there's probably a month of vacancy, and yet you're at 99.2%. It's a very stable market for what we're trying to do. This project has 107 units. 15% of those units are market rate, 85% are affordable. We're doing 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom, and the rents range from $285 up to $1,120, and then the 3-bedrooms are at $763. So these rents, it's a wide range. That's because we're promising the Wisconsin Housing Authority that we'll serve tenants at 30%, 50%, 60% limits, and then we have market rate in there also. So some people are at $285 who are at 30% of the area median income. Then other people who are market rate could be as high as $823 or up to $1120. So it'll be a wide range for rents and options. Most of the units are 2-bedroom, as you can see, 37 1-bedroom, 54 2s, and then 16 3-bedrooms. I won't bore you with all these numbers, but we want to show you exactly what we're doing here financially. It's a $17,611,000 total development cost. $500,000 is for land, and then the hard construction cost just going into the building is $12,674,000. We have a lot of other costs, architectural tax credit fees, almost $1 million, $890,000 in loan fees and interest to banks. Then we have a $733,000 contingency. That's a requirement under WEDA's program and with our investors that we build in extra money for unforeseen things that I'm sure will happen. They always do happen. We recently in Indiana, we dug up a site. It was supposed to be a nice clean site. The basements were still there from when they tore homes down in the 60s. So it was $50,000 just to get rid of those basements and bring in clean fill. So that contingency, if we don't spend that money on things that we didn't expect, we will spend it on upgrades at the property to make it a nicer property. We do have to spend that money because we're taking tax credits on it. The way the tax credit program works, if you get credits, you have to spend the money to earn those credits or to support those credits. On the sources side, almost $12 billion, $11.5 million comes from the equity investor who will buy the affordable housing tax credits from us. They come in as a partner and they get allocated the credit, all 99% of the credits, and they'll give us $11.5 million for that. This project supports $3.7 million of permanent debt, $600,000 second perm loan. We have an $802,000 deferred development fee. So as you can see, the developer fee on the right is $1.4 million. Of that, we are agreeing to defer at least $802,000 of that, which leaves right at $600,000 of profit for us on this project, just in the interest of full disclosure. We have requested of the city, and we're going to talk to them this afternoon, a $100,000 home loan. And then we're here today to talk about if the Housing Authority can participate with us here, a $200,000 grant and a $705,000 loan. That loan is at 2.5% interest we're proposing. And for that to count, it has to be at 2.5% or the applicable federal rate, whichever is less, for that to count for points under WEDA's application process, which I'll discuss in a minute. Here's the site plan. It's a little rough looking. It's kind of hard to tell, but we're building two buildings or two areas where we have townhomes on the right side of the screen, and I know you guys have this in front of you, I believe. So there's two rows of townhomes with parking between them, and then a larger building, that's the multifamily building really, running east to west over to Broadway Street. Then we have parking, it says storage, but those are garages and or storage that the tenants will be able to utilize. And that butts right up to the property to the north of us. We have 130 parking spaces in the garages and the surface parking together. Then I won't, these are small, but these are the floor plans that we submit to the Housing Authority. This is more to show you how they lay out, and that we've put a lot of work and time into this property. We have the floor plans designed already. We have the elevations. This is the multifamily building, the long one that'll stretch over to Broadway. And then the townhomes, here are the floor plans for the townhomes, and that's the elevations for the townhomes. All of it, if you go to our website, or I could describe them, all of our properties really are high quality constructed projects, very energy efficient. We pay the sewer and water, the tenants pay the electric bill. These will be, I think, all electric, I'm not positive. If not, the tenant would pay the electric and gas. And so we have 2 buildings like this that are townhomes and 1 larger building, 4-story, I believe. That is, yes, that's a multifamily building. Our schedule, we're going to submit December 8th, so it's just less than a month away now. Submit to WIDA our application for affordable housing tax credits. It's a very competitive process, as you guys probably all know. It's painfully competitive. We won't know until March 2018, which isn't that far away, but March of 2018, the board at WIDA will announce what projects around the state were awarded the affordable housing tax credits. If we're successful, we'll close on our financing in September. We'll start construction in October, and conservatively, we'll be done in January of 2020. Maybe a little earlier than that, but we just want to make sure we give ourselves plenty of time and not overpromise. Stabilization, you guys probably know, that's a term we use for when all the units are occupied, both the market rate and the affordable. And we think, given the market up here and how tight the housing market is, we think if we start in January of 20, we'll be leased up by August of 2020 also. And with that, I can take questions, happy to answer anything you guys might have.
Thank you, very interesting.
Thank
Are
you.
there any questions?
Can you tell me on the map, where's Broadway?
Broadway, I can tell you. Let me see if I
That's
can.
right, you're not-
It's on your left.
The shelter.
Broadway is
On
the
the map.
street on the left, right? This is Broadway.
Got it, okay.
That park is on Broadway, I believe.
Yeah, this is the park that sits on Broadway, just, yeah. That
Got
has
it,
the path in
okay.
it, yes.
The shelter's like ghosted underneath it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Here.
yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
You were just throwing me a softball first, so. You know, let me talk a little bit about it, if I could.
Yes,
The competition at WIDA is, the reason we're here really is because we need points in our tax credit allocation plan. We're right now at 121 points. We're working with Baker Tilly, which is a consulting firm here in Wisconsin. They're telling us to be safe, we need to be at 126 or 127. With this request, that would give us 5 additional points, so we would get to 126 if you guys were able to see your way clear to approve that. It's the other cities, Madison in particular, and they've latched onto this. They know this is the place where deals can get funded if they can get some type of financial support from a city or municipality or the county. And so we're just trying to get over the hump to get up to that 125, 126, where we feel very, very good about the score that we're going to have here. So that's really the point scoring. It's a horrible way to run a business. Like sometimes you think you should go to Las Vegas and just put some money on black, but it is a point scoring process, and we need to get there.
Just so you know. It's
Did I say?
Yeah, it's
Oh, sorry.
220.
It's $200,000 and
No, it's 221 to 227.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
The
just want-
points.
just so
Thank
that
you, thank you.
Somebody's familiar with the
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, sorry. No, I'm glad you said that. So that's really the point scoring thing is so important to these deals. It's just you get funded or you don't, and you have to wait a year or give up. Well, thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any other questions?
I think, if
Yeah.
I could just
Yeah,
offer
go
some
ahead.
comments in terms of, the larger development perspective, and then about, the points scoring. You probably saw this summer, the process of development for, this project called the Rail Yard and everything north of really Kellogg Street. And, what's been presented, it's always been talked about, this mixed-use area. And I think, what DDL presented in that development agreement was, look, we're going to take the 2 warehouses, rehab those into office space, and we're going to build some new, market rate or higher-end townhomes on the east side of the property. With that, we want to own the property and look at future development projects in there. So, with that, I think we had initially been talking with Jonathan Elke from, TWG, probably for a year and a half now,
Yeah.
if not 2 years. And just, have been talking about these things in parallel. Once we realized we're down the path with DDL to secure the development over there, we made sure that they connected. And I think it's very important that, DDL is going to be serving as a master developer of this property, and that they're on board, that they're comfortable with this, what's being proposed here today. And I think one of the things that, we've stressed both from a city perspective and redevelopment authority perspective is that we are building a new neighborhood. And a new neighborhood includes all types of uses. And it also includes residential products for all types of incomes. And I think in terms of, we felt the location, product offering, and in doing that with a developer who's got a very solid record, both in terms of the construction and management, is really important. Again, because this is going to be one of the newest projects into that area, it's important to set the bar high for what we're doing. And so I think with that, I've also had some conversations with Ms. Restgard about the potential for partnering on some type of housing project here. I think we're able to start to achieve that there in terms of working advantage of the resources at the new community shelter. So I think in terms of the development angle and what we've been looking at through that agreement, it's very much in support of that. And what we're at again is a phase right now where we're looking to be able to say, look, from both the city, redevelopment authority, housing authority, how much do you support this project so we can get the points to move forward with it? So I've been also having some conversation with Jonathan about DDL acting master developer. They'll be, per our development agreement, putting in some of the infrastructure for this facility. So we will be able to count some of the funds that we spend on that infrastructure also into the scoring.
Sure.
And in terms of then, what's before you today, and we've talked at staff a little bit. Look, the Housing Authority has a pool of money, and I'll let you go into the numbers. And with that, I said, look, just bring your ask. And I think in terms of, it's up to the board here to decide, how much that they would like to provide and in what combination of grants or loans. But I think of most importance, that timeline for the application is coming up, and they would like to leave with a decision today. Okay. And I think, I've talked with Cheryl, Robin, Stephanie, about some options with that, and based on that, I think we'll go back and we'll continue working with Jonathan and figure out a way, to make that score maximized. But we really feel in terms of some of the objectives I think that the Housing Authority is going after and providing a new product, the numbers don't lie. 100% occupied, and we talked about yesterday, some of the things. Look, Green Bay in itself is an affordable market, but our stock is not all the best. And I don't have to tell you guys that.
Yes.
So to be able to offer a product for somebody, with a limited income, to have a site, not only quality construction, but then also location. A lot of these jobs are downtown, so the ability to be able to, walk to work, bike to work, not have to travel far, is a real advantage of getting that mix of housing in our downtown area. So I came today. I appreciate Rob getting this on the agenda, just to lend our support from staff perspective, and also the folks from DDL couldn't be here today, but just to say that they on the record are very supportive of this project and are working to make it happen here.
Very good. Does the planned urban development for that neighborhood get that far north, or does it stop short of there?
So we are going to have to look at some tweaks to the PUD.
Yeah.
The plan that was in here is from the authenticity plan. The PUD that's on the site calls for some mixed use, and talked a little bit about, at this northern end, some institutional uses. Now, depending how you want to interpret, institutional, and this isn't a public housing project, but in terms of providing some assistance, I think what we're working on is revising that PUD to reflect, maybe some more nuances in terms of what we're looking at that district. What I think doesn't change is, and I know this got hashed out with Walmart, is that this is a mixed-use neighborhood. That you're looking at retaining the street grid. I think you see Bond Street being extended in here. And I think that's one of the things we pushed this team to say, look, how much can you compact in here, because we've got a lot of great acreage downtown, and I think the way that they've done this, and we probably had 3 or 4 iterations of this. You've got a 4-story building that really, mirrors the warehouses nicely, but you're turning it on its side. So you've got some frontage both on Broadway and on the new extension of Bond Street. So, you're kind of creating that same type of feel, the scale. And then the townhome product, mirrors, again, what DDL is looking at the southern end of Donald Driver Way. And in terms of that scale, so you've got your highest, most intense uses on Broadway, that kind of scale down as you get towards the railroad tracks in order to help, kind of preserve those views of the park and the river and downtown. Kind of a long answer in terms of that PUD, but we feel like, look, this fits in, with the intent of what was desired for that area.
What's the total square footage? Like 130 neighborhood?
Yeah.
Say 140. I was going to say 140. Yeah, that should be about right.
You are anchoring your new development with $120 a square foot residential. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we're 100 to 110-ish usually, so somewhere in there. It's probably a little bit more expensive construction market in Green Bay than some other markets we're in. So yeah, that probably sounds about right.
And I think, we've also talked about redevelopment site, and we've done a lot of due diligence on this site in terms of the environmentals and soils and some things. But again, I mean, we're dealing with downtown, and until you start digging, what you find, we're pretty confident that we're able to, cover a lot of that. And again, reasons for, the development agreement with DDL in terms of providing some of that funding, working on the infrastructure for also, remediation, that we feel, it might push the bar a little higher in terms of the per square foot cost.
Part of that's also WIDA or any of these state agencies, they have green requirements and energy efficiency requirements and things we do to limit the ongoing utility costs of tenants and meet their mission as far as green and energy efficiency. So sometimes you will find that affordable housing may cost more than a market rate housing deal. So that's just the environment we conduct business in. So maybe a little bit more expensive than other projects.
If you recall, last month we talked about the safe and stable housing plan that UWGB did for Brown County. And one of the many solutions that they proposed was getting more tax credits in this area. And as Joe explained, the tax credits are very competitive, and they're based on the points that the developers can accrue. And one way, as he explained, of getting extra points is by partnering with the city. And so it seems that may be partially the reason why we don't have as many tax credit projects in this neighborhood as we used to, because we haven't yet kind of set the precedents for how to make those partnerships happen, whereas other communities in our state have done that. So being as that the Housing Authority is part of the governmental structure, we have that unique ability to be able to help develop more tax credit properties in our area. At first I was thinking about how the Housing Authority could financially participate in this, and the idea of giving a grant, while it was appealing, it was a little concerning because the funding that we have, our unrestricted funds, aren't being replenished. So to give a grant, we would definitely see the development in the community, and that would help with the need that we are aware that exists. But we wouldn't necessarily have that money to loan out again or to give out again. So I think this, creatively looking at a combination of grant and loan, we could discuss what works for us and what will work for them as the developer.
Can I add one?
Sure, go ahead.
I didn't really go over this. Right now, last year's applications to WIDA, the average score in this category is a 15-point score, was 13.5. Without funding from you guys, we're at 5 points. With the funding we requested, that would take us to 10 points. That would double our score. We'd still be below the average, but we think with our other features, that gets us over the hump to have a successful application. I just wanted to put that in context of where everybody else is. Thank you.
I have a question, since Commissioner Sandy's not here. She would always ask this, but what's the, is there handicap accessible units in this development?
Yes, there are. My recollection is in Wisconsin, the entire first floor has to be handicap accessible, and all the other units have to be adaptable.
Okay.
And I will confirm that.
Sandy would always ask that.
She'd be very proud of you.
I don't know that. Any additional questions?
Well, I guess.
Well, can I just clarify one thing, though? TWG is going to the redevelopment authority, but I believe the ask is for a grant, for home funds for a grant.
Correct.
So that was $100,000 for a home grant.
Okay.
And staff will be recommending approval of that, so that would be the $100,000 for the grant. And I think in just, talking with staff, we looked at the 705, and that seems a little rich. That along with the grant might deplete the majority of our reserves. So I guess I think we want a little discussion on maybe how that might work better.
Yes. Right. And I think when we discussed, you can give the numbers, and I think we said make the ask, and we were going to dig in to see how much we had unrestricted and able to use, and that ended up being?
We came to a $500,000 loan, up to a $500,000 loan for up to 35 years for no less than 2% is what, as staff, we had kind of come to as a number.
Okay.
I think that was based a little on the balance right now is about.
We have 1.3, but we wanted to keep 500,000 on hand. That way, in case we have our own needs that we need to take care of. So that would only leave us 881,000. And with the asset they have, that's even greater than what we had really available to lend out. And so with that, looking at just 881,000, we thought a $500,000 loan would benefit their program, but also it would also get that money out there in the community, but it would bring more money back in so we could get more money back out to the community.
Okay.
So I think one of the things we've discussed, and in terms of, and again, it's up to this board to decide a little bit on the term. They have some restrictions in terms of, to qualify federally in terms of interest rate where it has to be at. I think in terms of, guaranteeing you a return on the investment, I think, modestly the 2%, I mean, is more than we're getting in the bank right now. But then also to look at, talking through, I think there's a good understanding that that money in there we would like to get back out working in the community to work on these projects, and in terms of the process of doing so, making sure that we can get a very important project off the ground, but then that you're not handicapped in terms of future projects coming forward. I think with that, again, up to you in terms of whether you want to make any of that forgivable over a period of time, after, X amount of years, and then the project's going and it's done what you want it to do, and then, you have other balances coming in. But then I think just going back to, again, based on your recommendation here today, then for us to also look at, again, other ways for the points. And I also, just before I left for vacation, I talked with Jonathan about, opportunities also with the redevelopment authority and housing authority for other bonding that you can do. And acting as the bonding agent to be able to participate and, again, have some better clarity and competitiveness on the interest rates. To use us as a vehicle, to use the housing authority or to use redevelopment authority, the ability to bond for that 30 years,
right.
Helps in terms of, again, shifting some of that participation, or, where they had, some permanent debt or long-term debt. That might be something that other ways for us to decide. But just to go back, I think, staff had discussed, and, Robin, Cheryl, Stephanie, came to me, and I think we're all on the page, though, that we want to get some of that unencumbered money into the community working on housing projects. I mean, 100% occupancy right now, there is no doubt in my mind that we need to start doing some projects.
And historically, we've been amenable to that. We've looked at other projects. They, unfortunately, for other reasons other than what happened at this board, they didn't go forward. But in the past, we've expressed the willingness to participate in varying degrees to these types of housing projects that are going to bring in affordable housing and handicap accessible housing to the area. So it's we're not necessarily breaking new ground with this. We've been down this path before, so.
To some degree, I look at it as it's our responsibility to look at this project and recognize that need we have. I mean, wow. It's tough for people to get an affordable, safe apartment in our community right now. And being a great need, it seems like we need to address that. It's our responsibility to address that as the Green Bay Housing Authority.
Is it our responsibility to offer funds to it via grant or loan? I think it's a great project. It's a great anchor on an end that needs a lot of work in our town, and I like the idea of some affordable housing. In our responsibility to help them fund it is the question.
I think we have I think that's what we've been talking about. We have vehicles to do that. The grant component of it gets a little.
Is it precedent? Have we offered a grant for that sort of thing before?
I would say the NeighborWorks Armory project, and unfortunately the Armory didn't work out the way that was originally intended. But then ultimately we transferred that money to a housing-related project.
Right, but wasn't, and I may be wrong because this was a long time ago, but across the street from the Armory, there was that bottling plant.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't there some grant money that we gave with that? I know we were involved in the financing for that, but for some reason or other, I thought there was a small component of that might have been a grant. I'm not certain of that. That was.
I do believe you're correct.
20-some years ago, if not longer. I've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
So we offered some grant dollars to the Armory project, and that did not go the way it was presented, and we got those monies back.
That was a loan that we.
The Armory was a loan.
Okay.
But across the street, this was I think this is a NeighborWorks project, but there was an old bottling plant across the street to the south of where the Armory is now that was turned into apartment units, and we were involved in the financing for that, and I have a recollection that a component of that financing was a grant. And I think it was, and I don't know the exact terminology for it, but it was sort of backloaded type thing, that was, the grant money was like the last dollars in type of thing. There was some financing, I think we were involved in some loan arrangements with that, but then a portion of it was also a grant. Kind of like what the proposal is here, a grant, and small port, the major part of our involvement was loan-based, and then there was a small component that was grant-based. Along with it. And again,
And I know that there was money given to that project, and I know that part of it was a grant. I just cannot remember if it was GBHA, BCHA, or both. I know that there was grant money given to the NeighborWorks building and the apartment building down there.
Yeah, there were actually, I think, 3 developments. There was the Armory one, there was the bottling plant, and then there was the structure that NeighborWorks is in now. That was all part of that. There's 3 separate projects, but they were all, we were involved in all of them, one phase or another. So.
Well, and I think that shows how long it's been since the housing authorities participated in a large type of housing project.
I think the last one beyond that was the convent.
The sisters, yes.
But that wasn't that bonding?
That was bonding.
Yes.
And then before that would be University Village Housing?
Yes, yes. So we've done some over the years, but it has been a good decade, at least, since we've done something like this. But my point is, there's a historical precedent for this kind of involvement in projects.
Can we afford it? You said 500 at 2% on the loan value. So we approve that today, and a local developer comes with a similar project with as much good needs tomorrow, and we have to tell them thanks but no thanks, because Right.
But if we lend out the $500,000, we would still have $300,000 for other developments. And that would still leave us our $500,000 that we wanted to keep in contingency for our own needs.
Okay. So we'll be able to support a smaller project or a smaller involvement in another project as well.
And as Kevin indicated, this is something that the city has been working on for at least 2 years. It's good for the city, it's good for that area of the city, it's good for the people who are in need of affordable housing.
I totally don't disagree. I think all of those pieces are spot on.
Stephanie, you said that there was 1.3 in this fund?
Yes.
Where did that money come from?
There's revenue bonds, which is a large part of when we have them, we get our money back in for them. And then there's a large portion is also considered, it's COCC, which are Central Office Cost Center, which right now, the Central Office Cost Center is the administration of the 2 smaller programs, which is Mesa Manor and Scattered Sites. We can build those amps for administration, and then as of right now, which will soon be changing, that money is unrestricted, and HUD is changing those monies that are coming in as restricted, and then this money will no longer be able to be used for that kind of project.
And what's the split roughly between how much of that is
1.2 is revenue bonds and 149,000 is COCC.
Yeah, so I thought that was small.
It's not so, right, smaller one.
And if you're interested, I did run some calculations. Right now, if we left that $500,000 in our in the savings account with the new rate that we just got from our bank, over the course of the 35 years, we would gain $116,000. If we did an annual repayment on 2% from the $500,000, we'd get $200,000 worth of interest back. And if we did a monthly payment, we'd get $195,000 back over the 35 years. So we would be gaining more to lend it out than to just let it sit.
You know, I just look at how much money we have sitting in an account, and it's doing our community no good. Right. Us earning that interest, if we can get it out and get units created. I mean, if not the Green Bay Housing Authority to do this project, who better, I think, of an entity then?
I agree.
Our mission is to create affordable housing, so.
Does staff have a recommendation as to, in terms of the financing component of it, what the recommendation is for us to consider?
Well, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you talk to Jonathan, and certainly if you have any other information, when you talk to Jonathan about the option of a $500,000 loan, he seemed to indicate the scoring would still work out about where it would be?
Right, and I think that was predicated on the, we still need to have, he needed to have some further discussions with his development team about also including through a development agreement, DDL putting in the infrastructure and what that would cost you in terms of backing out. I think those numbers are pretty close.
We get about around 1 point for every $165,000. So as presented, we had 5 points. If we'll get 3 with 500,000, which is still very helpful and very much, and we can start to work with the city on trying to scrape up some more points.
Right, and I think the you know, indication was, okay, let's see where the housing authority sits. I think we've discussed at staff. I feel, again, it's the housing authority who decides. I feel that the leaving $500,000 in reserves against some old properties, that's a smart move, just regardless to have it. Should something, you know, it's not like we had a lot of new buildings in terms of Mason Manor and other things. But then with the rest of the funds, I think being able to, you know, so long as there's a program to work, and I think you said, you know, getting that money out in the community does not leave us with enough, but with restrictions potentially coming down the line, you don't want to necessarily wait too long to do that. You know, I think in terms of, again, the $500,000 amount, you know, providing them 3 points, I think we'd look for other ways to get, you know, 2 additional points in other places. And again, up to you if you wanted to look at, RDA is doing 100,000 in home funds. If you wanted to say 100,000, that was forgivable. I think there would still be a process yet for coming back. I mean, this is for the application. there'd still be a process before we'd actually, draw up the loan documents to make the loan. We're not gonna drop those documents today. It's a process of, look, they just need some commitments that they can go to HUD and say, or WIDA, and say, look, we've got this commitment from the city. And so if there's anything in terms of, if you do want to make any of it a grant, I would do it now, because then if it ends up being a loan in the future, okay, you're kind of stepping back from that. But, kind of put best foot forward here today, and recommendations, and I think as we had talked about, that 500,000 helps move this forward.
Would converting part of it to a grant boost the points?
Yes. It would, slightly, yes.
Yeah, that sounds less fun, because.
Right.
Just for assurance purposes, let me just say, this money, you would never give it to us, or we would never ask for it until construction started, and we would close all of our financing, the equity investor, our construction lender, and this financing at the same time. So there's no risk that we're going to get the money, fritter
Right.
away,
Right.
and then have you
As-
say, well, what happened? When did you build it? You'll be at the ribbon or the groundbreaking when we start. Your money won't
As
be.
you know, from me being on the stadium board, and we tend to give away a lot of funds and a lot of loans and things, and their criteria is that in terms of the grant component of it, is that they're the last money in.
Yes.
It doesn't go until everything else is locked up and secured. So,
Well, and frankly, I would recommend, and we'd be happy to have the grant documents say, it's a grant, but we have to pay it back. It becomes a grant when we finish construction, not even start. When we finish and get these units up and running, then there's a grant piece that if you guys saw your way clear to do that, that'd be great with us. But we would not expect it to be not repayable until we perform completely.
correct.
If the goal is acquisition of points and not necessarily the monies, why the duration? Why 35 years if you're chasing?
Just has to
points?
match our first mortgage.
So would it work for you to make it a shorter term?
No, it wouldn't, because it has to match that first mortgage to be subordinate to it. It can't come due
Right.
before the first mortgage.
Okay.
Gotcha, thank you.
So you mentioned that the $500,000 loan would get you about 3 points. Do you know what, if you wanted to get a few more points from our partnership, what would that take?
Yeah, so it's 495 is nice to have a little bit of cushion. To 500 is 3, 660 is 4. Yeah, so it's 100. So it's kind of a percentage of the deal. I think it's the actual. I'm rounding a couple $100. The actual number is. Oh, I have it somewhere. It's 164 and change. So $165,000 a point.
The bonding, yeah, I think we'd have to go through and discuss a little bit more where that would fall
Sorry.
through, and I'd want to run that. Yeah.
You know what? I actually messed that up. It's 176 per point. So really, so really the cutoff. Sorry about that. I had the numbers switched around. So really, we need 528 for 3 points. Sorry about that. So 530 basically is what we need for 3. Because it's, if you go back to the cost of the project, I think it's 1%. I think that makes it. Yeah, so 1% is gets you a point. So 1%, so 3% is $530,000.
Any other questions?
So would you get an extra point if 100,000 of that was forgivable? Or was it?
I believe so.
Is that a way to
And I
generate
would
more
need to-
points
I need
if-
to
you know what I
defer to
mean?
Jonathan a little bit on that and exactly how that works. I think
Okay.
a lower interest rate like 2% instead of 2.5% gets us a little bit.
Okay.
And then a grant instead of a loan gets us a little bit. How those work together.
How they work
I
together?
can't speak to.
Okay.
I wish I could, sorry.
You know, if there's some of it that was forgivable, or those are how that would play out.
Well, that might be another consideration in terms of the, like you said, working the numbers on the interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at whatever for investment right now, I mean, making enough money at 2% to go down to 1 3/4, or just, you know, so long as you're still staying above where you're at now in investments. And again, you're projecting out, but a way to kind of like squeeze it just a little bit further might be an alternative.
Any other questions? So you need a commitment motion from us at this point, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
How
Yes.
specific does that commitment need to be? It sounds like we need to indicate what the percentage would be, how much would be a loan versus a grant, so that you have that information for the point system.
So the initial discussion was to say, request to be a loan not to exceed $500,000 and at no less than 2% interest. Based on a discussion, like if we're talking about a point, I would recommend that a loan of no less than $530,000. And then if you want to do it at 1 3/4%, and then I'm going to leave it up to you in terms of your recommendation for if any of that would be forgivable. I think that just two things. I mean, to get the 3 points, to get that potentially a little more from the interest rate, and in terms of your thoughts, in terms of, again, precedent for giving money to a project when it would be forgivable. I mean, that's up to you if you would want to do that. But I think that in terms of a commitment for that, you know, and kind of knowing from that, you get 3 points, 530 loan at that interest rate, you know, for sure it gets 3 points.
Yeah.
And that, you know, to kind of work and figure out, like you said, other amenities, other things that we're doing, you know, to get higher on that score point. I feel like that would be a good commitment, you know, from this board today.
And run it by me again, how does the interest rate affect this? If we went from 2 to lower than 2?
It would affect your payback.
What we would get in would be less, but it's still more than what we're getting from the bank. But I believe that the less that you pay in interest, the better your points are.
The further away we are from a market rate of interest, it tweaks the benefit to us, because you guys are agreeing to give us, you know, the benefit of that money at better than the market rate, so we'll get a little bit of benefit from that. In fact, to the point where I think that if you guys approve this, we wouldn't want to say at least an interest rate of 2%, because they might read that as it could be 5 or 6, and so maybe an interest rate not to exceed a number would be better for us.
Interest rate has an influence on these points?
Yes, it does. It has to be below
We're
the
raising the
applicable
threshold to meet the points?
It has to be below the applicable federal rate, which is at 2.5 right now.
So it couldn't be any high, we couldn't lend it out at over 2.5.
Right.
But we were saying, look, if 2% then provides a little more, provides a point because it's lower than
A little more
2,
useful.
but still is higher than our interest that we're getting in savings of what?
0.6.
0.6?
Yeah.
0.6?
Wow. I guess, without putting it in a form of a motion, I guess I'm okay with the 530. I'm curious as to everybody else's thoughts on the interest rate, and I'm still thinking at the 2%.
I mean, all of it being better than 0.6. Why wouldn't we want 2.5? That's what their ask is offering here. I mean, this is money for us to earn. Why would we want to shortchange that?
Because we have given 2% loans to other entities, and we were kind of staying with where we were at with other entities to be.
Well, I think it gets you more points. The
Yeah.
bottom line is it's more points to the
That's what I was
project, but
gonna
other
say.
than that.
Yeah, we will be looking for points now, which is great.
Right.
You know, that's our job. And so anything you can do to help. But you're right, at 2.5.
Well, I mean, yeah, I
we'd
appreciate
be
your
very
need
happy.
for points, but I mean, a revenue of 0.5% on our coffers seems like good dollars spent. You know, I mean.
I think that was part of in the discussions, the trade-off between, look, grant money, instead of giving grant money, okay, we'll get the savings then and the interest rate. And that was the trade-off for that 2.5 to 2, which again, still being double of that, still allowing for some income without strapping too much.
Yeah. The way I look at it is we kind of have this one shot to make this project happen. I would like to see them get, as many points as we can realistically give them. And correct me if I'm wrong, but even half points count?
Yes, correct.
So you could get maybe enough that you get 3.5 points, for example, from us, and you can make up that other half somewhere else.
Yes. And to the extent that, and this sounds self-serving, but I'll say it, paying it annually instead of monthly generates more interest income for you because it's outstanding longer. We could do that. Whatever maximize that return for you guys in terms of when we pay it, we'd be happy to do it. Knowing you want to pay it at least annually. I'm not.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact WIDA is very competitive. So I think our goal is to give them all the ammunition they have to have all the points they need and still have to compete. I mean, that's not a gimme.
Right.
So they're still going to have to compete with other projects out there. So to give them the best advantage.
Is there an opportunity for us to do some of the bonding of either this loan or the equity entirely? Is there other avenues for us to make some revenue off of this project or this loan?
Historically, our bonding is usually they use our name, they get the loan at the whatever rates they can get, and then we get, like, I believe it's 1% is paid to us annually off of what the original bond number is. So if they went out for 2.3 million, we get 1% of the 2.3 million paid as a fee to us annually over the course of the 30 years. That's how bonding generally works.
Yeah, understood.
But I don't know how that plays into what you get for points.
But I mean, on this project, we will deal probably with Associated Bank. That's one of the main banks we use in Indianapolis, and so Associated Bank, I think we'll have a very good lending rate. Construction bonding, we don't bond our deals because we don't have to. We haven't had to. We've been fortunate enough to have the balance sheet to carry these deals. Unless we use HUD financing, then we have to bond it. In this instance, we won't be bonding it. But when you say bonded, I think you're saying really staying behind the project and we pay you a fee for that. Is that what the bonding you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. We could do that if you guys wanted to. If it doesn't tie up your credit too much, we don't need it. It's not in our numbers, but we could build that into our numbers if that's a benefit to you guys. We'd be happy to do that to generate some revenue for you guys.
Just thinking about the avenue of a lower percentage on the loan or a different place to rearrange the
to the extent
earnings.
that a bank like Associated would give us a better interest rate with that bonding, that's a win-win for you guys and for us. So we'd be happy to explore that and commit right now to doing that to the greatest extent possible, to the extent that the deal can afford it.
I think that's one of the things I've talked with Jonathan about, maybe even over and above this based on the points, not necessarily a substitution. And that's why but again, in terms of looking at other agencies or entities, whether it's this and or redevelopment authority, you can do the 30-year bonding is trying to get, look, I know it makes the stack more complicated, but I also think it's good when you have other partners involved and you're not putting the burden too much on one authority or entity.
Any other questions? I guess to me it sounds like there's still a question here in terms of the interest rate, how many points or half points or quarter points that might generate. So based on that, I think what I will do is I'll make a motion that we agree to participate in this project to the extent of a loan of up to $530,000 at an interest rate not less than 1.5% nor more than 2%. So again, you can look at that in terms of the points issue with annual payments over 35 years.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any questions? Any thoughts? Any comfortable with that interest range thing? I mean, if we can knock it down a quarter of a point or half a point to get them a point, or a half a point or a quarter of a point, I'm happy with that. The difference is not, over 35 years, probably is not going to be that significant, but we're still more than doubling our current interest rate, even if we're at 1.5, so sounds outrageous, but that's the way it is. So that's my motion. We have a second. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, and best of luck with this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We really appreciate it.
Keep us posted as to where it's going. I will say this: if we are at some point where, we're talking about points here, but if we're at some point where we're hovering around a point, and if we can do some more, let us know.
Okay.
We're glad to come back and take a look at this again if we can help out to put this over the
Should
goal
we
line.
explore if the bonding helps us with points?
Yeah,
If you can, if you can, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's meaningful that you guys haven't supported a project for a while, so we're really appreciative.
Yeah, we really do appreciate it. Yeah, we'll make
Well, I
you
think
proud.
this is an excellent project, and
Thank
I
you.
wish you all the best of luck, and hope you can put this together, because
Yes.
this is something that we need.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
You're
much.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon. Drive back safely.
Thank you.
And for the media, our next topic might be of interest too, if you want to stick around. It's up to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, that was lots more dynamic than
That's less expensive talking about that. All right, moving on to item number 3. Consideration with possible action regarding discussions from the City of Green Bay Finance Committee meeting of October 24, 2017, and the pilot paid by GDHA to the City of Green Bay.
Okay, so I believe you've all seen or at least heard about the Finance Committee meeting on October 24th, at which time they discussed the possibility of basically requiring that the housing authority sell off our scattered site properties to basically put them on the city tax roll. They're interested in gaining more revenue for the city, which would, this plan would result in somewhere around $24,000 additional revenue for the city if the scattered sites alone, not counting Mason Manor, were back on the city tax roll. So we've talked about this at length as staff. We've talked to our chairman. We've provided a variety of documents in your packet to help facilitate this discussion. We've come up with a couple ideas as as staff and together with our chairman. But we wanted to use this opportunity for the rest of the commissioners to give any input you might have.
And just, I'm not sure everybody knows what a pilot is. It stands for payment in lieu of taxes. And there is a formula by which the, and I think it's a HUD formula, if I'm not mistaken.
Right now, there's a formula that we use a HUD formula to calculate that payment in lieu of taxes, which turns out to be actually less than what the actual Green Bay portion of taxes are on the levy.
Right.
For scattered sites, it's about $24,000.
Right, so it's all, again, with our 57 scattered sites, that what comes to about maybe $500 a property or something like that, that we're paying less than
units,
if
yep.
it were on the city tax roll. And I understand from earlier discussions with staff that the consideration here is, do we increase our pilot payment to make sure that the city gets its full tax revenues?
cover the $500 difference?
Yes, per property.
Well, 24,000 would be the difference. If the housing authority funds an additional $24,000 payment to the city, then there would be no reason for them to want to sell the properties, because they'd be receiving the full tax from the city.
But, as I, just from my personal opinion on this, the city's getting less in tax revenue than, I don't want to say they should, but they would ordinarily be getting if these properties were were privately held properties.
Yeah, they're also a safer bet, though.
True.
I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
There's like, us owning and maintaining and managing these properties is an investment in the city that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
It would be more of a gamble for them to make more money off of it. I appreciate it.
There's no question that the city is deriving a benefit from these properties being managed by us, the city.
Is there a way of quantifying that advantage? We're not the only municipality, God's Green Earth, that owns properties, right? Like what quantifies these things? What is that benefit? What is their percentage of property tax that they can make good on, or don't get paid, or have to go, you know what I mean? Like what's, you know, they're not one for one on their dollars on property tax either. What's their loss, and how is that compared to this $24,000? I mean,
Did you get a chance to watch the finance
I
committee?
did not.
Okay. I think the bottom line really is the, I felt like it was if it went on the market privately, they would all have all the taxes paid. That was the argument at the finance committee meeting. I felt the general argument that they made was with regards to the levy.
Right.
I just have, so they pick, or an alderman picks affordable housing, that's where you're going to make up your decrease in money, in revenue, city revenue. There has got to be other avenues to gain more revenue for the city than affordable housing. Really? And I have a hard time with us saying, well, okay, we'll pay more. I would challenge them to, you need to find other avenues for this. You don't get...
How many sites are we losing by that Webster Street expansion?
Two units.
2 years.
One.
Do these statistics include those or not?
Well, we're going to be replacing that property.
Right.
We are.
HUD, I don't want to say requires, but the rule of thumb with HUD is that if public housing properties are going to be disposed of, they should be replaced with other properties.
So in our funding from HUD or whomever, is there a balance that could appease some property tax from the city? Like, is there a reason to purge some and keep the others, or a different reconfiguration of our scattered sites, or is it the more the merrier, the more we can put people in? I mean, I guess that's like, is there a way to meet them in the middle on that without
Well, there's a vast need for affordable housing in the community.
I don't think we want to
You look at the
Right.
wait list
Right.
for Mesa Manor alone.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
was gonna
in the
say.
process.
And aren't these more,
You're
this is
gonna
majority
Mesa
family.
Manor next?
Yes.
They
These
haven't
units are-
been picking on Mesa Manor yet.
Yeah,
What
right.
is it coming up next?
Right. It's hard to say.
All we have on our plate is scattered sites.
The discussion has been scattered sites at this point, and the majority of our scattered sites are family.
Yes.
Based housing, they're not one unit, one bedroom,
Right.
right? They're larger units, so certainly there is a need that exists for that. I would certainly not want to support getting rid of any of them. I think if anything, we would need more of them, but.
Yeah, and now, did I hear that Mr. Nicholson is not willing to come to a Green Bay Housing meeting to discuss this with us?
like, what are we actually supposed to
I
do?
don't,
I thought I heard...
I haven't asked him to do.
Sandy
I saw
proposed that, and
Yeah.
my email response, and that was just via email. And in my response to her, I indicated that Mr. Nicholson's typical way of communicating things is via official communications to committees, to city and county committees.
You're not specifically
So-
speaking for Mr. Nicholson, nor have any we asked.
Correct.
No, because we were directed by the Finance Committee, we need to go back to the Finance Committee on November 28th.
And what are they?
With the answers with regards to, are we allowed to sell these units? What would be the HUD requirements with regards to selling the units? You know, those types of questions. There was also, I think, discussion on merging again of the housing authorities. You know, and is there the ability for, you know, the council to dissolve the housing authority? You know, those types of discussions for efficiencies.
So if we go back and say, no, we love all of our sweet properties and things anyway.
Yeah, I think
Which seems like it's one of our options, I guess. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yes.
Like, what authority does council have over?
In my discussions with HUD, and we're continuing those discussions, basically HUD is saying HUD regulations would restrict that. These are
Restrict
essentially the sale of the properties.
Okay.
These are essentially HUD properties that HUD is allowing the local housing authority, or, you know, requiring the local housing authority to administer on their behalf. And there are regulations in place that would prevent the disposition of the properties without certain, you know, criteria that requires that. So, I mean, that's one side of it, but the other side of it is we just don't want to, you know, throw regulations at the city aldermen. We want to try to work with them in coming up to a mutual, you know, something that they're not going to continue to try to push back on this because, you know, we're just standing firm. We want to work with them and find a way that's going to work for everyone.
That was part of the discussion
say
I think
you gotta
we
be
had
nice.
with regards to, we had with the city attorney,
There's no other.
was whether or not, you know, how that would work if the council were, let's say, to take an action, you know, to dissolve the Green Bay Housing Authority. The Housing Authority is not a separate entity. It's actually part of, how do we figure that, part of the municipal structure? Or?
It's part of the municipal structure, but we are a separate legal and distinct entity,
Right.
like a commission. So those properties are titled in our name, the housing
Right.
authority's name. They're not titled in the name of the city. If you go on the tax roll, the tax records, and you look at them, the tax bills, or the online records from the
Right.
treasurer's office would show that that property at that address, the owner of that property is the Green Bay Housing Authority, not the city of Green Bay. So there isn't a direct way where the city council could say, sell the properties. They don't have the authority to directly order us to do it.
Right.
But there are roundabout ways that they can get to that point, depending on how many loops they want to jump through and arrangements that they want to make to take over certain responsibilities that we've already undertaken. And you know, again, they have the authority in the broad scope of things to dissolve the housing authority if they don't like what we're doing or not doing. Again, there are a number of obstacles to that. They're not insurmountable, but they're there. So they and again, in the broad sense, they have the authority to say we're no longer going to have a housing authority. So, I mean, it's an issue that has come up, and to be honest, as I said in the previous discussion, I've been on the housing authority for a long time. Until this discussion occurred here, I wasn't aware that I knew there was a pilot payment that was being made. I wasn't aware that our pilot payment was short of what the tax revenues are going to be. That's news to me. So that's one of the reasons it's on the agenda, is for us to understand that we're the pilot. Again, it stands for payment in lieu of taxes. It's designed and intended to be a way that an entity that doesn't otherwise pay taxes on property pays for municipal services and those kinds of things. And HUD has a formula that we've been following, but that formula is less than what the actual tax payments would be. So there's that roughly $500 per property difference in taxes. So, I would suspect if we started in a process of selling these properties, the cost of those sale expenses would far exceed the $500 that they might make off of this. You know, over the long term, maybe it's different, but again, the other component of this is that these properties were problem properties before we got them. We've taken them off of that problem list and put them onto a responsible list. They were, I would guess that there's an investment here that's been made by the city in these properties that's enhanced the value of them if they were to go on the open market. Because they're not trashed properties, they're properties that have been well maintained over the years. So we've actually benefited the values of those properties if they were to be sold on the open market.
Absolutely.
Tremendously. So,
So we need to craft a response that puts that in understandable terms? Is that what we're talking about? Is that what we actually, you know what I'm saying? Like what can we do in response to the finance committee?
Well, I guess the response would be, do we want to consider paying the extra $24,000 a year in tax payments, or do we want to have some other, to make up the pilot difference? Or do we want to craft some other response back to the city?
It would make sense to me that we would identify that this thing is in place, educate them on what we have in place already before we offer giving any more additional dollars. Like, is there a way we could say, hey, this is in place and this is per HUD's equation?
We did that. We did that to the finance committee.
Okay.
So that's been done already?
We shared all the pilot documents with the committee and the list of properties and went through pretty much all of that at the finance committee.
Yeah. So.
One of the things that I think about is the innuendo of affordable housing in this community sometimes, right? And, you know, if we as, you know, the entity of the GBHA has the ability to pay that difference in the levy, that takes the levy off the table as a discussion point, as a resource. It's a money issue. It's not affordable really housing, it's just the levy issue. We pay that, that's off the table now. So the discussion needs to be, do you want affordable housing agreement or not? Because if you pay that full levy amount, you pay the full pilot, what would be the reason to get rid of any of those properties, in my mind? I think if you really wanted, if there was another reason for you to want to get rid of affordable housing, then you'd have to really come out and say that. It wouldn't be a resource issue.
Right.
So that was kind of my reasoning in my head, but that's really up to the board and whether or not, you know, we'll go back to the finance committee with whatever, you know, directed by the housing authority. But I think that was kind of the thought process in our head. We have the ability to pay that. In fact, I think with the additional payment, doesn't that also give us an additional portion of the subsidy? Won't make up the whole amount, but.
Well, it does, it increases our expenses, which increases the amount of subsidy that we would get. It's not a one-for-one match by any means, but we would get more back from HUD then because it would cost more to have each unit. So our subsidy would be higher for each unit.
So that's, I guess that's a discussion. Do we want to make that levy or just say?
Well,
no? Go back to
there was that 24,000 whatever and change difference between the current pilot payment and the actual levy. Is that number going up and down every year, or is that a pretty steady?
Well, it's probably based on the mill rate, right?
Yeah.
What we paid now is off of the revenues that we get in. And I'm not talking about HUD revenues, I'm talking about rents. So as we've had more vacant units, that number has gone down. So they are receiving less pilot from us because we're not receiving rents from tenants.
Okay.
So it's your rents, less your utilities, 10%. That's what we pay. And since we have more vacant units, we have less rents, and our utilities are still there. So that number, it has been steadily going down with the vacant unit issue.
The pilot payment number.
That we've been paying.
So if we were, let me switch it around a bit, if we were sort of fully occupied, that it wouldn't be 24,000 that's different, it would be less than that.
It could be less than that, yes. Depending on what those rents that, the 30% of the tenant's income towards that rent, that number that we get for rent could be much higher than, less the utilities. And then we're only paying for water utilities then, we're not paying for electric utilities, because that's on the tenant's side. So then we're paying less in utilities. So that number is depleted, so they would get more.
Could that number, that HUD calculation, ever exceed the pilot amount?
No.
Okay,
In the
so it's not
calculation,
like-
it does say it's supposed to be the lesser of.
Okay, so either way, it would be the lesser of what that levy amount is. Okay.
If you look in your packet, the first attachment after the cover sheet is the response that we gave to the Finance Committee back in December of 15 when they brought this issue up earlier. And we did include a chart that shows the history of the pilot payment over the years. That doesn't include 2016, but 2016's information is a few pages further in on your packet when you get to these pilot calculation sheets. And I also want to clarify for the record, when Stephanie is talking about vacant units, we all know, I think everyone here knows, we have a waiting list. It's not that there's not a need for these units.
Right.
It's just that we have such a backlog from tenants who have either opted to move out or we've had to terminate because of failure to abide by policies, or that they've had medical situations or deaths that resulted in moving out. So that's the reason for the vacancies, not because there's not a need for these, and we just need to catch up with how many vacant units there are.
Right.
But I guess that my point was that this $24,000 difference is not something that is necessarily going to be $24,000 a year forever into the future.
Right.
It's gonna fluctuate from year to year.
Although if you use the rates that they have, because they're not usually reassessing all the time, it would be a little bit easier for budgeting to be like, oh, this is what we're paying for a pilot every year. I don't have to do this calculation. You know, this is what it is.
Every year the tax bill changes though, depending on the levies, I would think
But,
so.
I mean, but it's gonna be
Right.
easier to calculate, because right now, going off of revenues and expenses, yep.
It's a much
otherwise, you know, it's like,
Yep.
well, the rate was 8%, well, it's gonna be 8.5 probably. It's easier to structure where that's going, over the course of the
Figure out
long
that
run.
help.
Yep.
So Stephanie, what would be your recommendation if we were to pay an additional amount for pilot? How would you structure that?
I would look at how the assessor's office actually does it, and then kind of mimic them just for the city portion. So what your assessed rate is, usually it's done in thousands. So then you divide that, whatever their assessment is, by 1,000, multiply it by the rate that they have, their mill rate, and that would be it.
And again, it's only the city's portion, it's not the state and the
Right.
county
Yep.
and the
Yeah.
vocational school, those things.
It would just, and usually, rule of thumb, your mill rate is usually like 21% or something like that, but that's because it does have all of those in it. So each one is usually like 6 or 7%
Right.
of it.
Right.
Any other thoughts, discussion, considerations?
I guess I'm thinking if you're saying we do this, then we're off the table and we can,
No, there's no guarantee.
Rest
of that.
Yeah, but
There's no guarantee that,
there's
but-
no specific number either.
But then they would have to come back and say that they don't like affordable housing. It
It
can't
would
be a
take the
money issue.
levy question off the table. So, which for, I think a few of the alders at that finance committee, that seemed to be the issue, was the levy.
Yeah.
But it would be not to exceed that city portion, whatever it would be.
Right.
Yeah, it would be,
Every year, I mean. That's actually HUD, I think, language as well. HUD allows us to make that.
State
but
statute, I believe, addresses.
yeah, that
not
would
to
have to be the
exceed.
state
Right,
statute.
right.
So, I'm sorry, what is the actual number? Should we bridge the gap on every red cent they wouldn't get otherwise? What is the total dollar amount?
Well, I think that's
Because it's not
hard
that
to-
24 grand number, right?
Yeah, it is.
This year it would be.
Yeah,
This year would be.
And some change, right. If you, let me find which page here. Okay, the one with all the scattered sites, listed, looks like this.
Yes.
At the bottom, we calculated what the Green Bay, it says scattered site Green Bay tax, $33,748. So that's how much the city would receive from the Green Bay Housing Authority for the scattered sites. If we subtract from that what we actually paid in the pilot for 2016, which was $9,206.23. That difference, and I don't have a calculator, but it's roughly $24,000.
Yes. Any other questions? Thoughts, any comments?
Just having the hardest time figuring out exactly what it would take to appease the entire amount, or can we meet them in the middle somewhere? You know what I mean? That's what-
We don't know.
Well, yeah, so then we can't be throwing 24 grand at them if we don't know, right?
Well, that's what they would want. I mean, if you
Right.
ask what the finance committee would want, they would want the full
They would
heavy
want the
amount.
full,
I mean, so.
Yeah.
And I guess, again, my thought is that I'm okay, to be honest, paying the 24,000, and my reasoning is that we're paying our share of city's expenses for this property, police and fire services and those kinds of things, which any other responsible taxpayer in the community would pay.
With the asterisks that we've improved these projects.
Oh, absolutely, but again, the other side of that is that, you know, I think over the years I've made my house better by, you know, painting it and keeping the yard cleaned up and doing all the other stuff that we do from the housing authority standpoint. So, yeah, that's certainly a significant component of it. But again, the fact is the city is essentially enabling us to do that by having staff and so forth to do that. So, you know, I don't like the fact that this is in front of us to do this, but and I think it opened my eyes to the fact that we weren't paying, and you know, we were following the HUD standards, but we weren't paying what you know in general the pilot is intended to cover. And pilots and it's not payment in lieu of part of your taxes, it's payment in lieu of taxes. And there are a number of organizations and entities that pay a pilot. So it's not, particularly with the HUD formula, we followed it, but it doesn't cover all the expenses for having these properties. That's my thought.
And when you put it that way, I agree with you. You know, with the city service, I get it. I get it. Where I get stuck is that it became an issue to begin with.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But
There's more to the agenda than is on our agenda.
So you're suggesting that we beef up the pilot to make the city whole?
In a roundabout way, yes. I mean,
Yes.
my recommendation would essentially be that we pay the full amount of the city's component of the property taxes on these properties.
On the for the scattered
For the
sites.
scattered sites.
Can we afford it?
Yes. Our scattered sites do run in the red now, but, I mean, we do have some money that we have in excess. No, we wouldn't pull this from unrestricted. We would want to pull it from the AMP, because if we pull it from unrestricted, then we wouldn't get the money back from HUD on it.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we pull it from there. Yeah, I'm looking for my sheet. Just give me a second. So, and what this would do though too, is it would increase our expenses, yes. but it would also increase our 6-month expenses, so what we can keep for a reserve. And right now, we do have $40,000 in excess funds right now for scattered sites. So, I mean, we can find the money for it. It's not going to be easy, but I mean, we can pay this, and it's within the rights of, you know, what HUD will allow.
And let me just interject. This 24,000 is based on numbers for 2016, right?
Correct.
So we wouldn't be paying them 24,000 because that's back. We'd be looking to do this into the future wherever it goes in the future. So it would be a different number.
What
When was our-
Scattered sites pilot, what I budgeted I budgeted $8,950. That's what I budgeted for the coming year, which I will pay out in June of 2018.
And when was our last pilot payment made?
We make them every June.
June? Okay, so we'd have another pilot payment coming up for June, which is in our budget
Yep.
currently. So we'd have to re-budget for it for next year.
Yep.
So if we were to change the pilot payment, that first payment would come in June of 18? No, June of 19.
Technically,
Yeah.
unless you wanted to change it for the June of 18, which you can make that adjustment.
But we've already budgeted.
No, yeah, that budget's already done.
It's a possibility that if you don't want to look at, I'm fine with not dealing with.
Okay, so I think you just said we can afford it. I think that's what you just said.
Yes. we
There was
could-
a way to
yes.
make, there was a way to allow us to
Yes.
afford it.
Okay, so if we think that it is our responsibility to keep the city whole, is that a responsibility that we should share with our renters or a burden we should bear?
It would not
We
go to the
can't.
renters.
We can't change any of
Correct.
the rental
Correct.
arrangements, or can we?
No, it's part
based on
of, what we
their
have is
income.
HUD's
Based on
rates,
income.
and that's what we can do.
Okay.
And what happens if property tax goes up?
Pay more.
You just pay more.
like
And that's
anything.
true,
Just like we
and
would.
that's
Yeah.
That's true for-
Yeah.
that's true for if we had more revenues, though. If we have more revenues coming in.
If we have more
we pay
revenues,
more.
we pay more
Yeah,
pilots. so.
but if your renters are fixed, what happens?
Well, it's not fixed. We cap out at an amount that they can't pay more than, but right now, they pay 30% of their income towards that rent. So if their income goes up, then our rent goes up. So it's
Yeah, but if our operations and maintenance costs go up, their rent stays
The
steady.
same.
That's the deal.
So, I mean, the city, if we were to pay the full pilot, that calculation is based on a determination that the city makes citywide.
Correct.
Our revenues on which we currently pay the pilot are based on essentially our operations
Our occupancy.
and occupancy and
amount of rent.
and the amount of rent and so
Tenants pay,
forth.
and
And so, based on the HUD formula, what was that number? Was it the 30%? Or when you make that calculation?
10%.
For what? For the pilot?
Yes.
The pilot is the rents that we get less the utilities that we pay, 10% of that number.
Okay, and who determines whether it's 10% or 12 or
HUD.
HUD?
It's like a
Okay.
HUD form.
It's
So is that like a
HUD's form.
minimum or a maximum, or is there any variance in that?
It reads that you pay 10% of line 8 or line 13, whichever is applicable. And then payments in lieu of taxes are line 15 or 14, whichever is lesser. And line 13 is shelter rent collected. I don't know what, we've never calculated.
Okay, so I guess, as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking, is there a way, again, as you mentioned, to sort of bridge that, is there a way that we can increase, not necessarily with getting to the full pilot, but is there a way that we can increase that percentage amount so that we're not committing to allowing the city to essentially set our rate, we're still setting our own rate, but we're increasing it?
I think offering to beef up the percentage rather than give them the
No,
full
can't do
amount.
I don't think we can do that, right? Isn't that a HUD predetermined calculation?
That's part of their form. I can't change that form.
I
Right.
think HUD says pay us this amount or pay up to the levy. It's up to you.
So, but
But this
we
is the
could,
high
we
formula.
could still say we're gonna pay,
We could say that the percentage, I can do the calculation, the percentage is 9,000, we're gonna pay the 9,000 plus an additional X. Or what I could do is into the dwelling rent, because right now it is just dwelling rent, I don't put subsidy in there. You could add subsidy to that number, because then it's rent plus subsidy.
or that the first sort of formula you gave, that the percentage plus something, could that be another percentage? We're gonna pay 10% plus.
If 24 grand is 100%, and I realize it's a moving target, I'm like, can we offer them half of that and see if it suits them? Yeah, I mean,
Well, yeah, who knows?
Because then I have to do, it would end up being that I would end up doing two calculations. I would calculate what their amount is, I would have to calculate what we would pay, and then I'd have to calculate the in-between.
I mean, yeah, I understand that. I'm very sorry.
No, but
I'm just trying to, like, without giving them, like, because they asked twice.
Yeah, and
You know, is
I
there
guess my
something we can do
counter concern to the first argument I made about paying our fair share is that we're locked into how much revenues we're gonna be getting to do this. We can't raise our rents, we can't, so we're stuck. But what I'm looking for is, can we take that base percentage and then offer to add to that another 3% or 5% or something like that? So the base percentage plus 5%.
I mean, yeah, so maybe we could afford the whole lot, but comfortably could we afford
So,
less?
well, what we, and what I had said before is that we do right now is our rentals, our dwelling rents, which is what is required. But our HUD contributions are roughly about the same that we get. So we would be doubling our income, but we would also still be taking our utilities into consideration, and then we'd still be paying that 10%. So we would have, sorry, gotta find my sheets here.
I'm glad you're looking at that because I'd be lost.
Okay, so last year we paid 128,000, so say we paid another 128,000, so that'd be 250,000 less our utilities, which were 36,000, so we would be at 224,000. 10% of that would be 22,000. So that would be not what they wanted, which is 33, but not what we paid, which is 9. It would be kind of a happy medium.
And how is that explainable?
Right, I mean, like, that's.
Well, I would expect this committee to attend the next finance.
Yes.
I was just gonna say, the group, the crew that's gonna be taking this under consideration, I mean, after watching the finance, video.
Well, I think it's, what I'm trying to get to a point is that it would be explainable in terms of the fact that we are increasing the amount that we're paying to the city based on an adjustment.
That we'll consider we can consider the revenues that we get from HUD as rental income, which would increase what we have by, we wouldn't be paying everything, but we wouldn't be leaving them in the cold either.
You could also just say you're basing it on the flat rent per property instead of the subsidy and the rental amount.
What's the difference? I mean,
because I'm just
than
thinking
just
how
paying the
confusing it's
24,000.
getting.
Well, that's the whole point, right? Is if there's a passive way to answer the question
Right.
that's simple.
We're not basing it on 30% of the renter's income. We're basing it on the rent, the flat rent amount. So that would make it, instead of saying we're subsidy.
They're gonna be like, we're still.
Right, I think it's very,
Right.
it's very
And that's true,
confusing
but
when
it's
you
also
say the
it's also
subsidy
an
amount, the
amenity
rental
our city
amount.
offers.
What those
Right.
two combine is the flat rent amount.
I don't know if they necessarily view it as an amenity.
Right.
I think it's a better place to start than offering them the full lot. If they give us bad news or want it further, then we can entertain it again. But I'm not sure that it's that dynamic. Like, I think might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and we have a chance to at least retain some of it. That, you know, I just.
Right. Can you help me put this in the form of a motion that would say that?
So your motion would be to amend our current payment in lieu of taxes form to include our HUD subsidy in the calculation, and then pay the 10% of that. Is that what you're looking for?
I think I understand that.
Could
Just
you
scare me.
repeat like 2/3 of it?
So we're gonna amend the HUD form, which will
We're going-
allow larger, I'm trying to put things.
Yeah, we're using a different component to the HUD formula that increases the percentage number. We're still paying 10%, but we're paying 10% on a
Of a
larger.
larger piece of pie, yes.
Okay.
My only talking point is this, if we commit to paying the full amount, we would not have to send that payment until 2019.
Well, that was the second, my motion is going to be that what you said, to be effective for our budget for 2018-19.
That could be, I mean,
Because
unless you
we've
want
already
to amend your
budgeted for
budget
this
for
year.
the 17-18.
Yeah,
But
I
that
mean,
would
I
also
think
give us
whatever
more time to
we're
budget the
offering, we
loss.
push to
the next tax
till
year.
the next tax year.
Yes, our next tax year, because we've already budgeted for this year.
But if we do commit to the full amount, that would give staff more time to budget how we can
Oh,
find.
trust me, I'm gonna budget at a higher amount.
Right, I understand, but just so we can make the city happy and so we don't have to keep coming back to the table and fighting these different numbers, that gives us a year and a half as staff to budget to committing the full amount that they're requesting.
Oh, they actually haven't made a request, this is more of an offer or
Right,
or an
exactly.
adjustment on our part, so. I think that in the simplest terms, we're adjusting our pilot payment based on a different formula within HUD's framework.
Yep.
So we're still responsible to HUD, because these are HUD properties, and we're working within the HUD formula, but we're changing the amount within the HUD framework.
To the city's benefit.
To the city's benefit, yes.
And then we'll realize an increase, the city will realize an increase in
Of
payment.
about $13,000 for scattered sites. Do you want that to apply to Mason Manor also?
No.
Leave it off the table.
No.
That's what, I just want a clarification for my.
$13,000? So,
$13,000.
okay, because we have a budget meeting today,
Oh, okay.
4:30, city budget meeting, so I just want to be clear if that comes up.
Okay, so you want to postpone the decision on this till next month?
It'll come up regardless,
That's right,
probably.
right.
You know, I mean, so that's fine.
Because then we're not paying the full 24, we're paying 13,
Okay, so
which is a little bit of a give and take.
Formally, we are making a motion to increase our pilot program to
Include our HUD funding, our HUD subsidy in our calculation for pilot. That is what we are doing.
Okay, so this is still in discussion, and there's a motion here, but it's still in discussion sort of citywide. I'm now thinking, or also thinking, that in terms of doing this, that's our proposal back to staff, to take a look at this and work through that formula, and then to come back at our next meeting and look at it more in specific detail of how is that going to affect our budget, and how we budget for that, or how we work that into our system. So we could tell the finance committee that, yes, the information that you presented to us did show us that there's this discrepancy, and we've already budgeted for this year, so not a whole lot we can do immediately, but we are looking at how we can change the pilot program to increase our amount of payment to the city. We don't exactly know what that's going to be yet, but we're looking at it. So I think, then we in essence, we're telling them, we understand your concerns. We saw that there is a discrepancy in here in what they should have gotten and what we're paying. We're looking at a way to address that concern within our budget. And there are ways that we can do that. We just haven't seen the full analytics on that.
Yep.
But there will be an increase. We don't know what it is because we have to work through the process yet.
And we'll take that up at the December GBHA meeting?
Well, whenever you're ready
That
to, with everything
Okay.
else you have to do, whenever you're ready to present that to us, we'll take that up. But nothing will change for the current budget year. So we still have several months. When do we have to do our budget? When do you start doing that for
We'll
8th
start doing
grade?
that March.
Okay, so, there's a time frame for us to
Really
analyze it.
Love it.
Who is that? Can I ask who is at the finance meeting?
It's been a pretty good time.
What are you thinking?
I think that's
About
a fine
their-
motion.
What?
I think that's a fine motion.
Can you put
can
that
take
into a
forward.
motion word so I don't have to repeat it? Thank you for the tape recorder. So that's my motion.
So, just in shorter terms, we are investigating the ability to give them back some.
To increase our pilot payment.
Increase the pilot payment.
Increase our pilot
Mhm.
payment. I would second that all day.
Okay, there is a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
We're coming up on 2 hours in.
Speeding, we're gonna speed this up very,
Yeah, number 4 through 7 are time-sensitive items.
yes.
The rest of them, we could probably table.
Okay, so let's go
Yeah,
through
good.
4 number quickly. Consideration of possible action to approve the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Great Lakes Commercial Sales for Mason Manor washer and dryer replacements, not to exceed $9,480, including trade-in allowance.
Bids came in, that's the lowest bid, including the trade-in, which we believe that the trade-in is our best, to our
Thank you.
advantage.
I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any further questions or discussion?
Making up time.
Yeah, just lost us sometime. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, consideration with possible action to approve the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Warner Electric Supply, for Mason Manor exterior lighting not to exceed $7,950. What exterior lighting are we talking
The
about?
parking lot
The parking
lighting
lot?
at Mason Manor.
And what are we doing with it?
Replacing the fixtures,
Okay.
which would include an LED bulb.
Okay.
So that LED bulb would need to be changed much less frequently, which would reduce our maintenance
So
costs.
the poles are staying, it's just the fixture at the top?
Correct. The
Great
new
investment.
fixture,
Yes, great
we
investment.
have already confirmed that it will fit with our existing poles.
Awesome.
Is there a motion to?
I would make that motion.
Is there a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
You have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item number 6, consideration with possible action to approve the lowest responsive and responsible bidder for Mason Manor 3rd and 4th floor carpet replacement not to exceed $12,500.
So this was bid out. Unfortunately, with the timing of things, the bid opening is tomorrow, so we don't know who the lowest responsive and responsible bidder is yet, nor what the amount is. But this is the amount that we're estimating that it might come in at, and we're hoping that you'd be willing to approve proceeding with it based on whoever the lowest responsive and responsible bidder would be.
And this is an ongoing project we're doing for,
Yes, in 2015, we did floors 1 and 2, and then we just didn't have time in 2016 to bid this out again, so now we're doing floors 3 and 4, and we did include in this quote the optional renewal for floors 5 and 6, and then 7 and 8. By the way, there was only one vendor who attended the site meeting, so, and purchasing did do their due diligence. They actually reached out to more contractors or vendors than they normally do, but for a variety of reasons, we still only got one come, so that we're only gonna get one bid.
So on the tuck pointing in exterior maintenance, I asked that we had a special meeting to look at the bids together. But in my mind, that's a really ambiguous project, right? Tuck pointing and exterior maintenance is not very definitive or finite, where carpet's carpet, and we did this project a couple of years ago, and I assume that this
It
number
came in
takes-
at the same number.
at this exact same number, so I would have no problem approving a not to exceed $12,500 for this.
Is that your motion?
That is my motion.
I will second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7, consideration with possible action regarding flat rents and utility allowances effective January 2018.
So HUD requires housing authorities to set their flat rents, and they can be no less than 80% of HUD's fair market rents. HUD's fair market rents changed October 1st, that's when they generally changed each year, and we are required to look at our flat rents to ensure that they align with the 80% of the fair market rent. Because the fair market rents increased, our 80% of that, which would be our flat rent, also would need to increase. HUD also requires us to do comparables with other unassisted properties, and we have conducted those comparables, and our properties would still be in line with the rents that are requested at other comparable units.
So this is a consideration to stay in line with HUD requirements, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, but this tells us what our rents are going to be that we can charge. I suppose it'll have a trickle-down effect to our pilot issues that we were talking about
And,
before.
yep, this is where that
Rubber
amount will be
meets the road.
changed. Yes.
Yeah. So again, tenants still pay rent based on 30% of their income, but we have some tenants, do you know roughly how many?
I would say about 5 at scattered sites and maybe between 5 and 10 at Mason Manor.
Okay, whose income has increased to the point that 30% of their income is more than our flat rent, so then they cap out at this flat rent amount.
And that's by HUD regulation. So, I will make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Anything in the rest of it that we need to approve the bills and the financial reports, so I think.
Okay,
So let's go to number 8, consideration of possible action on acceptance of GBHA bills.
just 2 things. We did have one that was out of the ordinary for Men Law Firm. The city was unable to take care of one of our legal actions, so they did have to farm it out to someone. So we received a bill for that. And then Special Forces also did pressure washing on, I believe it was the east side, but I'm not positive. East side. So that was done. So those are 2 kind of different things.
Other than that, everything is, didn't see anything that jumped out at me, so.
No, nothing to do.
All right, I will make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further questions or discussions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 9, consideration with possible action on acceptance of GBHA financial reports. That's in your packet. Stephanie, anything we should
Nothing
be aware
really
of or
else.
concerned about?
Nothing outstanding. We still have smiley faces, so we're still good to go.
Great.
Just kind of getting things in. Nothing too exciting.
All right. I will move to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, a motion. We have a double second?
Yeah, there you go.
Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Anything administrators report that we need to address or anything that can be?
The paint's been there for a while, we could probably put it off
Yeah.
until next month.
Everything remains the same for the bed bug report.
Okay.
We just finished our 3rd treatment, so we have our 30-day inspection scheduled for December 8th.
Okay. Anything interesting in the occupancy report
Nothing,
that we can't deal with later?
See a lot of people moving into nursing homes.
Yes, with our
Yeah.
aging population, we do have
Yeah.
quite a few Mason Manor residents that are moving on. But we have, the EDRC is doing a presentation to see how we can help our residents age in place a little bit longer maybe.
Awesome.
Good. Okay. All right. We ready for a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
You have a motion? I will second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, and again, I apologize for being late.
All right, thank you everyone for staying past their regular time here.
All of your goodies. Oh, yay. Jamie, will this number ever be 0?
I know.
What's, 3 repeat and 6 new? Is the 6 new, are they coming in with people?
Shut this off over there.
And then the
It's,
repeat?
I mean, what I'm hearing, it's starting to be community-wide.